Excellent. So today, as we're going to start looking at primal religions or what might be called traditional indigenous religions, we're going to be using a traditional Hawaiian prayer. Now, I want to start by saying this is my confession and my contrite heart for tonight. I am going to butcher a lot of words because my gringo tongue does not naturally say these words, easily. And so I just want to say that off. I know online right now, those of you who are with me live and those who are in this room are very forgiving people, but this will be online and on YouTube in perpetuity. So those of you who find this a year from now, please know I've worked very hard on these words, but that does not mean that I'm not going to butcher them. But it is done with the most, the highest amount of respect for the traditions that I am presenting to us tonight. Secondly, I have to say, one of the great tragedies of the Western world is the co-opting of traditional indigenous religions, mostly by, and I'm just going to say it out there, by middle class to upper middle class white people who co-opt indigenous traditions, having no idea what the deeper roots of those traditions are, but and they cherry pick this or they cherry pick that. I cannot tell you when I lived in Montana how uncomfortable that made my friends who were First Nations people, and how they very much taught me to have a heart of respect and to try not to co-opt. And so this prayer that I'm offering to us this evening, the Ho'oponopono prayer, is, I want to say, has been co-opted by New Age religions and New Age groups who have no sense of what is actually happening in traditional Hawaiian practices. But this is a beautiful prayer of reconciliation. It is a prayer used in the Hawaiian tradition, Native tradition, First Nations tradition, that when there is a break in the family, it is meant to be used in family systems. That when there has been a fracturing in the family, and when the family is working to reconcile with one another, that this is a prayer that is offered. It is a reconciliation prayer, and it is not meant to be said once. It's meant to be said 108 times. We do not have time tonight to do it 108 times. We're going to pray it 5 times. But it's not meant to be quick. It's meant to be integrated into your spirit, and then it is meant to be lived out in your life. And it is very much so. If Tim and I were kindred blood, and we had a fracturing of our relationship, after working to mend that relationship, then we would pray this together 108 times to as a way to mend the bond between us. uh, Contrition, confession, the act of mercy is something that is almost universal within traditions, and so I offer this for us today. So the way you pronounce this is ho oponopono, and you say it much faster than that, and it means to make right. And so I'm going to invite you at your own speed and in your own way to pray this prayer 5 times. Um, Again, I cannot pronounce the Hawaiian words, so I put the English translation up there for you. So where you are, online, in your own home, or wherever you may be, or here at Park Church in Spindler Dining Room, I invite you to join me in praying this. I will be saying it out loud, but you are invited to close your eyes or to meditate on these words, to say them quietly to yourself or softly under your breath. And we're going to do this 5 times. So I invite you to take a deep breath in and to release that breath. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. How did that feel? Did you, even with just 5 times? Yeah, Scott?
I was wondering what the magic of 108 times. I was gonna ask.
I'd have to look that up. I'd have to do a little bit more research about the 108. But even after 5, I started getting, I could start to feel just even and start to integrate. So yeah, so but there must be something about 108. Yeah, Lynn? Oh, you just got your, oh, it's got your, anyone else? Yeah, Carolyn.
I kind of feel as you're saying this, it just is kind of a wind down, let it out, you're done. You're asking forgiveness to somebody.
Yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. And um it's hard to say I'm sorry. It's so hard. Those are some of the toughest words to say to someone, particularly if you love them. It's actually so much easier. You bump into somebody, admire going into this door at the same time, and you're like, I'm sorry, or please, excuse me. And what does someone always say? That's okay. Yes, fine. You're good. Uh, Tammy will tell you, you're good is one of my least favorite responses to excuse me. No worries. I was like, Tammy will tell you, it's like, I go like, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. And like, they're like, oh, you're good. I'm like, don't tell me what I am. You don't know me. You have no idea what I am. Like, and Tammy then tells me to calm down. They're just really saying it's okay. But any other comments about this? Yeah, Tim.
So, I had to look up what 108 meant. So the 108 is considered to be sacred in Hinduism and Buddhism. Prayer beads, males have 100, males prayer beads have 108 beads.
Okay.
Repeating a mantra 108 times is to help fully complete a cycle of healing.
Okay. Thank you. I probably should have already looked that up. So it's a cycle. It's a complete cycle of healing. So thank you. Scott.
Another thing that occurred to me as you were saying this was how we used the chimes in church as a centering place. And this kind of felt like it was doing that for me.
Yeah, that's good. Um, so, um, so this is, just a review from last week. This is the definition of religion that I presented to you. A social construct, meaning that it is human formed, that is agreed upon by a community of people on the beliefs, the rituals, the myth, the ethics, the organizational systems that have to endure over time, multiple generations. Um, and then they explain the big questions of life. Where do I come from? Where am I going? What happens after I die? How ought to I live? Um, it really does try to explain things that are beyond us and stuff. So those of you who didn't get a chance to see that last week, I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to see it, because today we're going to begin talking about what is called either primal religions or traditional indigenous religions. And what we have to really kind of begin with is by saying that primal religions or traditional indigenous religions often began before religion was even a word. That the concept of religion wasn't even invented yet, and yet we as people who are people who have to organize systems and concepts in our lives as academics, we kind of lean on scholars and academics for this. These are the two most acceptable terms to relate to traditions that sort of predate time. These traditions that we're going to talk about tonight um, predate anything that we would consider to be quote unquote organized religion. That's why they're primal. They are primordial. They are before time in many ways. Not that they don't continue to exist. There are millions of people around the globe who still practice these traditional indigenous religions or primal religions. And I want to make sure that all of us know that every continent on Earth, sans Antarctica, because there are no humans living on Antarctica, there are people practicing primal or traditional indigenous religions on every single continent. There's not a single continent that doesn't have somebody. Can you think of a term that is often related to someone who may be practicing a primal or traditional indigenous religion? What do we what are these folks classified as or called in society? In our own country, what would we call some of these folks?
Native American.
Native Americans, right? Native Americans or American Indians. Those are the two terms or names that we would call folks who are there. Some people get uncomfortable with the word Indian, but trust me, American Indian is the correct term, or Native American is still acceptable. But what about in Canada? What are tribal folk called in Canada? What? Inuit are folks that are in northern Canada, right? Yeah.
First Nation.
Yes, First Nations people. That's exactly right. So I was actually really good friends with the son of the lawyer who defended or represented tribal people in Canada when the First Nations law was passed. Also in Australia is also called First Nation Australians. What we used to call Aboriginal folk are now called First Nation Australians. The Maori people of New Zealand. Any others? There are traditional indigenous religious groups in Iceland, in the Aztecs of Mesoamerica, in China, in Japan. What is the traditional indigenous religion of Japan? Anyone want to take a guess? Shintoism. It is considered a traditional indigenous religion. It was born in Japan. It resides still in this day in Japan. It is not kind of moved, really. Japanese people who are Shintos maybe have moved across the world, but it is located squarely in Japan. I also need to confess this. There are a lot of governments and societies and other religious systems who have done great harm to traditional indigenous religious groups and primal religious people. And at the very top of that list, but by no means the only ones in that list, are the Christian church. And in the congregational tradition, which Park Church is part of, we particularly needed to confess what we did in Hawaii. The congregational church was instrumental in the decimation of Native Hawaiian people and the overthrow of the monarchy, the traditional monarchy in Hawaii. Hawaii would not be a state in the Union if it wasn't for the congregational church. We were instrumental in that, and part of that instrumental work that the congregational church did, it was to almost eradicate Native Hawaiian people and their religious practices. So again, that contrite heart, we kind of have to start with that. But not every religion is antagonistic towards primal religions or traditional indigenous groups, but here as we are participating in this class in a Christian church, it's very important that we start there. Also, things that I would hope that you would eradicate from your vocabulary. These are just words up here that have often been used to describe people who practice primal religions or indigenous religious traditions that have been detrimental to their personhood. There is one term up here that that you're like, wait, but isn't there a recognized group of pagan people? In very many ways, the modern pagan tradition is not grounded in traditional indigenous religious practices. There are connections, but in very many ways, modern day pagans do not, in any way, shape, or form, owe their roots to what would be called primordial faiths that predate time. It is a modern movement within the last 150 years that may share some commonalities, but is no way, shape, or form what we would consider to be an indigenous, a traditional indigenous religion. But these are words that have often been used as slander, as a reason why governments and societies have not recognized these groups. And so it's really important for us to be aware of that. And here in the United States, it's actually violated our own Constitution. We actually have something in the United States Constitution called the First Amendment, where it says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And these terms have been used to prohibit the free exercise of people's faith. And so we have been in violation of our own First Amendment. One of the saddest books I've ever read was They Wore Black Robes, which was the work that the Catholic Church did in Montana to send young tribal children to Catholic school, making them cut their hair, making them learn English, making them only read the Bible, and to give up on their traditional practices, to the place where the Salish people, who are in northwest Montana, right outside Glacier National Park. When I left Montana back in 2012, there were only 9 native Salish speakers left in the tribe, where there used to be thousands of people who used to speak Salish. Now there are only 9. And they had actually established a Salish speaking school. And I read maybe 3 or 4 years ago that they were up over 40 people who were fluent. This reintroduction of the language. It almost went extinct. And all of that came out of the work of the Christian church. So like I said, it's very important that we begin with a word of contrition. So I want you to imagine you lived 80,000 years ago. What would cause you to start to ask big questions? That's not a rhetorical question. What would cause you to start to think, I wonder if there's something out there beyond me?
The night sky.
The night sky. Yes. Looking up at what we would call the heavens, right? Anything else?
Living on a mountain or up in a high place and just looking out.
Yeah. The vastness of creation. Yeah. Good. Anything else?
Lightning storm.
Lightning. Oh, yeah. Wow. No doubt. Tornado.
Right.
Hurricane. Any of those, right? Yeah. Earthquakes. Solar eclipses.
Fossils,
Which would be what?
creatures probably they don't live there, or
Okay, so yeah, right, they would have seen fauna much larger than what we.
right.
Yeah. Anything else? I put this up here as a hint.
Cave dwellings. I don't know.
Okay, so these are These are fossils of Neanderthal. These are Neanderthal fossils found in the Kurdistan region of Iraq. They date back to 60 to 75,000 years ago. It's hard to see the outline, but our Neanderthal cousins actually arranged their dead in this cave as if they were sleeping, where where the legs were curled up and their hands were underneath their head and they're resting. So not only the natural world, which is what you all mentioned in various different ways, but death. Death and the power and the beauty and the majesty of nature are the first two things that caused us to start to make or ask big questions. That is the birth of religion, is the natural world. In the Christian tradition, I often say that creation is the first testament. Before there's an Old Testament, before there was a New Testament, there was a first testament. And the first testament of God was the created natural world. There's a reason why you stand up on the top of a mountain and you see the Milky Way, and all of a sudden you're David, and you're just like, when I behold your manifest heavens, who are you that you are mindful of me? Right? Nothing like standing at the top of Glacier National Park, watching the Milky Way and pulling out Psalm 8. Trust me, Psalm 8 has never made more sense to me than when I was standing at the top of a peak in Glacier National Park underneath the Milky Way. I felt simultaneously incredibly small and larger than life. It was magnificent. It's one of my favorite moments. So, Neanderthals are our humanoid cousins, and they were practicing some sort of burial ritual. Now, you may have read a story that said that they found flowers in this cave. That has been debunked. They did find flower pollen, but it came from bees. But for a while, they thought maybe Neanderthals were actually covering their dead with flowers, which would have been amazing if it were true. But it was not. But not to be outdone, our Homo sapien ancestors also were so moved by death and by nature that they started the very first art. Now, these are recreations. If you actually visit the caves in France and in Spain, and you go and you're like, wow, that's really faded. That is not what Pastor Darryl showed us at class. That's because these are recreations, so you can actually see what the paintings actually look like. But this is the first example of art that we know. And very much is an expression of religious belief and spiritual thought, and very much speaking of the relationship of humanity with the natural world and with each other. What we will call today kindredship. That kindred or kinship is one of the hallmarks of indigenous religious traditions, as well as what we would call primordial religion. So 70,000 years ago, our human ancestors were starting to ask the big. Now they might have been asking them before that, but we have evidence that they were asking the big questions of life. Where do I come from? What happens after I die? Which is the very start of religious practice. But there are things that we want to say about primal religions that I think just need to be said. One is there's no such thing as one primal religion. There are thousands of them around the world. They are diverse. They are varied. They morph. They evolve. They change over time. Most of them are oral traditions, but not all of them. Some of the traditions and oral stories and myths have actually been written down. And some have recognized religious leaders and some don't. Some have sort of a tradition of shamanism to be like a religious leader, but others don't. And one of the things that is really unique about primal religions or indigenous religion is how gender and gender fluidity sometimes plays a role in being recognized as a spiritual leader. How many of you have ever heard of the term two-spirit people? Yeah, so there is traditions in the Inuit culture in northern Canada, in First Nations Australian cultures in Australia, and Native American, American Indian cultures in the United States, where a person who is fluid in their gender identity, what we might call in parlance of today, either non-binary or transgender, who sort of has one foot in both genders, who exhibit both masculine and feminine qualities, who might actually be pansexual or bisexual in their sexualities, are not derided and ostracized, but are actually lauded and seen as, okay, you're the next spiritual leader because you can represent both the masculine and the feminine, and you have a special role to play. Trust me, that didn't go down well with ancient Christianity. So it's a different cultural experience. Right. All of a sudden, gender fluidity isn't something that is scary and othered, but it's actually something that is set aside and lauded, and that's the people that those tribes are looking for as the next spiritual leader. I'll leave that there. You can do your own deep dive into the traditions that have sort of recognized that. But some spiritual traditions actually say it's heretical. That's not right. Hereditary. That's the word I'm looking for. Hereditary, and that it goes from mother to daughter or son, father to son, and the spiritual leader stays within the family. Others are each generation you choose someone else. And one of my great honors in life was I became very good friends with who was a young man who was being groomed. I was also young at the time. So I was like in my early 30s. He was in his early 30s, and he was being groomed to be the next spiritual leader of the Kootenai people in Northwest Montana. And his name was Jason Smith. And we would give him a hard time that he had the least native name ever. It was his own joke, and I sort of took it. But Jason and I became very good friends, and one of the things that I was so honored to participate in was what was called the jump dance. So one of the rituals for the Kootenai people is they go to Glacier National Park in January around this time, and they do 3 days of jumping, and they drum, and the drum is to mimic the heartbeat, and you're to jump.
3 days.
Oh my gosh.
3.
For 3 days. Now you can take a break, Tim. You don't have to do it continuously. And there are nurses and doctors on site because inevitably someone will pass out. And it was an incredible honor.
Something like that. I thought someone coming.
Oh.
He stepped on the cord outside.
Oh,
He jumped.
I jumped. Hopefully that fixes itself. And yeah, so you jump. And you do it for 3 days. Day one, you jump in honor of your ancestors and those who have died that year. The second day, you jump for the blessing of life and the blessings that you have in your life today. And then the third day, you jump for the future, that you have good health and good fortune and all the things you need for the life for the year to come. And the idea was that you jump until you melt the snow. That it was their way of like saying, okay, we're getting out of winter and we're getting ready for spring.
So should we start jumping now?
We should start jumping now. I am sure that damn headshot Poxitani Phil's gonna see his shadow. And we're gonna have 6 more weeks of winter. That darn thing. Some traditional indigenous religions are polytheistic, meaning that there is a pantheon of gods. Others are pantheistic, meaning that everything is God or sacred. But not all traditions are polytheistic. Not all traditions are pantheistic. Some that are polytheistic have only human gods, where others have tricksters and shapeshifters and things. But there's a misconception that all primal religions are both polytheistic and pantheistic. And usually it's one or the other, but not necessarily. Again, they change and evolve over time. And so these are the two most common. Any questions yet? Let me pause here for a moment. Any questions online? Please speak up.
Seems like when you were talking about the indigenous folks,
Yeah.
and maybe that's these primal religions. It seems like the humans or mankind has always had this innate sense to worship something, right? That's kind of why when I look at this, it's like why would what would draw someone to do that? Without being told.
Right.
Like we have this innate desire to worship something.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think I agree, Tim. I think there is something uh, fundamentally human about searching for something bigger and better and beyond us.
Right.
Right. Right. And think about the dreams that you have as a child, and like how many of you, when you were a child and you would start dreaming, you would ask like, where did that come from? How did I get there? Like, where did did that come from within me? Did that come from without me? No. Am I the only one? uh, this is how you end up being a pastor. You start asking these very like these questions, right? And so these deep like existential questions. I really do think that they're fundamentally human.
No one told me, I would still think that something within me would want to worship.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Tim.
I think a lot of the motivation, maybe your opinion on this, is protection from floods.
Mm.
Wanting a higher deity to protect you from
Sure.
floods
Sure.
or other natural disasters, but
Yeah.
that was, people would live on the near water.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Right. And how much is water? We're gonna actually want to end with a great water thing tonight, but um, um, and think of how powerful like water is, whether it's the ocean or whether it's whether it's the depth of of the Great Lakes, or whether it's I mean the currents in the Great Lakes are crazy, and or the power of the rapids coming down a river or something. It's like that's power that's beyond us, right? And so we might need protection. That's a great thought. I haven't thought about that. That's really great. Others, anything else? Any questions online or thoughts online? Okay. So primal religions are diverse, they're varied, they change over time. They are unique and diverse even amongst people who practice those primal religions. But there are certain things that we can say are common, some threads that can actually connect primal and traditional indigenous religions. That whether it is First Nations, Australians, or Inuit people in northern Canada, or it's Aztec people in Mesoamerica, there are some things that actually kind of bind and threads that are common amongst them. Probably the first one is a almost universal belief that humans are not the only spiritual beings in the universe. That there are that some everything from animals to the land to spirits to ancestors, that they are also equally spiritual beings as humans are, and that we're not the only ones with a soul that lives on beyond us. That is something that's a common thread throughout all primal religions and indigenous traditions. Secondly, that kinship is essential that it gives structure and meaning not only to your spiritual life, but to your everyday life. Um, Kinship was something that was very confusing to European settlers when they came to the Americas. They would, and I'll get to this in a moment, but for this kind of foreshadow, you know, Catholic missionaries would talk to, tribal people in Florida, and they would be asking the children, "Who's your mother?" And they would point out like 5 different women in the tribe, and they're just like, "Wait a second, you only can only have one mother." But their concept of only one person, one woman, one female taking care of them and rearing them and raising them, they didn't have the concept of like one mother, one father. They, like all these women were their mothers, and it confused the heck out of Catholic missionaries. And we know that because we have diaries of Catholic priests who did this, and they were not only confused, but they were angered by their lack of structure when it came to family bonds and this idea that kinship is beyond the nuclear family, which in America, at least in the 21st century, the nuclear family is is the primary structure of our lives. But in primal religions, the tribe and across generations is that. Next is that it's non-dualistic, meaning in Christianity we have a very stark line between the material and the spiritual, the physical and the sacred. In primal religions, almost everything is sacred, almost everything is spiritual. And then last, and certainly not least, is it is very tied to a place, the importance of place. And we'll get to that here in a moment. So those of you who have experienced primal religions or traditional indigenous religions, does this ring true to you? And do any of these feel, I'll use the word foreign to you. You read this, you go like, I don't know. It's okay. I mean, no judgment. I'm just like, this might be new, right? You're just like, oh, that's a different way of looking at it than the way I've normally looked at things. That's part of what this is about. Is this kind of touches on our own traditions, and we go like, oh, I wonder, that kind of thing. Yeah, Karen.
About primal religions and the importance of place. They didn't maybe travel as far. They were where they were, didn't know there was far off this place or far off that place.
Sure.
So their place was sacred, and their place was where they saw their bond and their kinship, and they could say that, the mountains and all these things have fed us, and it gives that spirituality because it's taking care of them there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the religion
Yeah.
was built on their lens of experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not a universal religion, right? Or religious spiritual tradition. It's very much there, right? We'll get to that just a little bit more about that. But that's a great point. A great point. Any other thoughts? So I'm going to take each one of these individually. So the first one, this idea that that there are spiritual beings beyond beyond humans. In the Mesoamerican Aztecian tradition, there is something called the Nawal. And the Nawal, they believe that there is a separate, they hold and consider that there is a separate spiritual realm than just what's going on this mortal plane. And in that spiritual realm are the Nawal, which are guardian spirits that are attached to you when you are born. These spirits often will take the form of an animal, but not always. Sometimes they take the form of a human, but mostly they take the form of an animal. So you might have a jaguar Nawal or a scorpion Nawal, which, gosh, I'm terrified of scorpions. So I hope that my Nawal is not a scorpion. But and then that the Nawal is also living a life in this spiritual realm. And what happens to the Nawal affects you in your life. So if the Nawal is doing well, then you're doing well. If the Nawal is sick or injured, then that's a reason why you may be sick or injured. And this bleeding of the physical realm that you live in and the spiritual realm that the Nawal live in is this idea that other spiritual beings exist. Or uh, in the Caribbean religion of voodoo, there is the belief in the Lwa, LWA, Lwa. The Lwa are spiritual beings that are attached to specific Lawal are spiritual beings that are attached to a specific emotion or a specific or a specific element. So if there might be a water Lawal, or there might be a fire Lawal, but there also might be a love Lawal or a death Lawal. And the Lawal you can communicate with directly, but the higher God doesn't want to talk to you. There's a grand God that is way too busy being God to be bothered by us mere humans. So we communicate with the Lwa. And the Lwa um, um, are receptive to us, and we can leave them offerings, and we can pray to them, and they will hear us, and they will advocate for us, to the point that the Lwa can possess you. Now, Christianity, those that term might scare us, and that might feel like, oh, that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Think of it more like a rider on a horse. You're the horse, and the Lwa will basically like ride you for a while to kind of like guide you where you are needing to go. And then when that is done, then the Lwa will leave you so that you can go on your own way. And so it's not a possession to take over or anything. It's more of a rider on a horse. Um, and so this idea that there, like I said, that there's this other spiritual realm, and in this realm, that these beings sort of exist. In Christianity, what would be our version of that?
Holy Spirit,
The Holy Spirit. That's good. Anything else?
guardian angel.
Guardian angels, right? The angels. Anything else? Any Catholics in here? Lutherans, Episcopalians, our saints, the saints. The saints are the wall. There are they exist in a spiritual realm other than us. And if you grew up Episcopalian or Anglican or Lutheran or Catholic or Orthodox, praying to the saints was a way for God's too busy to care about what's going on in your life. So you pray to the saint instead, or you bury Joseph upside down so you can sell your house. No, anyone? That's how you sell your house. If your house isn't selling, you get a statue of Joseph, and you dig a hole in your backyard, and you turn him, you bury him upside down. Is it Anthony? I think Joseph should get it. All right. How are we doing? Oh, I gotta hurry up. So, I was afraid of this. Okay, so kinship. And our friends from the Hawaiian tradition, the kinship is more than this idea of the status you have. Kinship is not just I'm Terry's brother or I'm Beth's son. Kinship is not just something you are. Kinship is something you do. There is a sense, I would call it communitarianness in primal religions, that you are responsible for your brother and sister, and they are responsible for you. And if you see that they are hungry, you have a moral responsibility to feed them. If you see that they're cold, you have a moral responsibility to clothe them. Vice versa, they have the same responsibility for you. You are responsible to and for one another. And there is very much an imperative that you take care of each other. That kinship extends, so we might do that for our nuclear family in Western culture, right? if I hear that my sisters are going through a hard time, one of them lost their job, I might start sending them a little extra money to help them out. But am I doing that for the people that live in my neighborhood? Probably not. Like, they're not part of my kinship group. I might do that for the guys that I went to seminary with or college with or grew up with. So we can sort of think of kinship in this way, but it's more than just, it is deep bonds with one another. Then, when those bonds, when someone who's in our kinship group dies, someone in the tribe dies and becomes an ancestor, you can continue to have kinship with them. And death is not a severing of that kinship bond. In fact, anybody who might have seen the movie, it's our movie about the Day of the Dead, the Day of the Dead, Coco, right? Coco is very much a primal religion, Mesoamerican. This is Hawaiian what I'm describing, but that's a very Mesoamerican tradition of the Day of the Dead. I actually have a Day of the Dead figurine in my office, or maybe it's in my office at home, which is a preacher Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. I love Dia de los Muertos. It's one of my favorite holidays. I also have a great affection for Mexico and for southwestern traditions. And so, being from Texas and California, it's one of the things I miss. By the way, if you want great Mesoamerican, not Mexican food, but Mesoamerican food, Mexico across the street is a fantastic restaurant. Cannot recommend that enough. So next, this idea that there is no separation between the physical and the spiritual, the material and the sacred. An example of that would be an Inuit oil lamp called a kolik. A kolik is a soapstone lamp. It is carved out of soapstone, and then you take moss and bathe the moss in seal oil, and then you will light the moss, and it creates a lamp. And it has a very practical, functional aspect to it, which is you use it to cook, to warm up, dry your clothes. Like, it's very practical. It's like, a pot or something. But it also has a ceremonial, spiritual side. And so this idea that something that's very practical and that almost every Inuit house would have one, and that you would use it for everyday items, can also be used for spiritual ceremonies. Can you think of anything in our tradition that may have started out this way, but then became something that, God forbid, we use it for anything except for ceremonial things? What we use for communion. Communion, it began just as a simple plate. And now it's called a paten. And it began just as a normal cup. And now it's called a chalice. And, if all of a sudden one of our children went up and took the chalice off the communion table and just started drinking it down, some of us would be like, oh my gosh, no, you can't, that's sacred. You can't do that. Only the priest can drink that. Which is true, right? That's why the priest drinks all of the wine, because he's the only one being close to God that is right? And the more wine you drink, the closer to God you get. So, no, that being said, it is actually it's very, no joke. I mean, it's actually very deep spiritual reasons why the priest drinks the wine. But this idea that there's this separation, this is sacred, this is material, this is everyday in traditions. I'll give you another example. I know we're almost out of time. I'm almost there. In my church in Montana, we had a drumming circle come, and it was beautiful. It was wonderful. They were great. But there was, all things considered, it was a white Caucasian drumming circle. And as a gift for the hospitality that we offered them, they left us one of the drums. And they were like, we would like to gift this to the church. You can use it for your own music ministry, however you want to. In my congregation, there was a woman named Amy who was Winnebago Indian. a registered member of the Winnebago tribe in Nebraska, but she now resided in Northwest Montana. She asked me if I could go out to lunch. I was like, yeah, always great to go out to lunch with parishioners. So I go, and she said, hey, I need you to know that a drum is not just a drum in my tradition. Like, drums are spiritual and sacred things. And I need you just to know that, I just need you to take care of that drum. Please don't just put it in a closet and let it like gather dust, but really think of it as something sacred. And I was like, oh, okay. And I drove back to the church and I took it out of the closet, which is where I kept all the musical instruments. And it was just a really great way to see the world through her spiritual eyes. Then I was very scared. Like upstairs, we have the timpani drums, but as you walk in, I bang on those things every time I walk by. I'm not spiritual. They're not spiritual. They're expensive, but they're not spiritual. But that drum, I treat it as if it was like, I treated it with such reverence. And it was so good. But if one of the musicians, Carolyn, did not come to me and say, you can't do that, yeah, tell me I can't do that. I'm gonna bang on every drum you tell me I can't bang on. But if you tell me it's sacred and that it needs to be treated reverently, oh, I'll treat it with the kindest of touches.
Like a shofar and some.
So quickly, the shofar, and I'm gonna bring my shofar out when we get to Judaism. It's so funny. Like, so I've asked rabbis, hey, as a goy, am I allowed to blow this? That's a Yiddish word for a non-Jew. So as a goy, am I allowed to like blow the shofar? They're like, it's just a ram's horn. Like, just like blow it. It's okay. Like, no rabbi has ever told me no on the shofar. But then Amy was like, don't touch that drum. Okay. So, and I was more scared of Amy than the rabbi. So last, this idea of place. Many indigenous people will talk about being from a place since time immemorial. And that they're not simply from a place, they are of a place. This is not like I was born in Bedford, England, or I'm from Texas. Like, this is the idea that place, and this is Two Medicine River right outside of Glacier National Park. And you can see what the Blackfeet word for Glacier National Park is there. And for them, Glacier was the backbone of the world. Like, it is where all creation started. And that mountain is a sacred mountain. And they were shaped and formed by the seasons and the flora and the fauna and everything about it. One of the saddest stories I've ever read was the book Counting Coup. Has anyone read the book Counting Coup? It was a story of a young basketball player from a tribe in Montana. She was the highest rating girls basketball player in the nation. And she lived in Haber, Montana. And she was Hardin, Montana. She lived in Hardin, Montana. And she was recruited to play basketball at the University of Connecticut, UConn, which you may know is like the greatest women's college basketball team ever. But the idea of going from the reservation in Hardin, Montana to Storrs, Connecticut, more than halfway across the nation, unfortunately, it was just too big of a change for her. And she flamed out, and within a year, she was back on the reservation and dropped out of school. Like, that idea that being separated from your place is actually separating you from your ancestors, separating you from your God, separating you from your very identity. It is a ripping of it. And what colonizers did to these lands, these rivers, these mountains, these forests that it shaped native people in our country and around the world. It was more than just them they just didn't lose land. Like, they lost themselves in that. And we're still feeling the effects of that as a country. So I want to end with a story about how all of this actually affects people's lives. And I know some of you, give me 5 more minutes and then we'll call it a night. This is the Wanganui River. It's,
Dang it.
this is the Wanganui River in New Zealand. And it is a sacred river to the Maori people of New Zealand. They had lived there since time immemorial. And they consider the river to be not only sacred, but to be living. It is a living being. And it is part of their kinship, part of their family. And when English settlers came to New Zealand, they saw it as a resource. And so they dammed it, they fished it, they utilized it for farming and for agriculture, which then led to it being, broken up and polluted and overfished. And so when that started happening, the Maori peoples started defending it, and they started defending it through trying to use um, the ways that they had available to them through the English crown. But they weren't getting very far. And so they decided that they were going to go to court. And this ended up being the longest court case in the history of New Zealand. It lasted 150 years. Wow. Generations of people fought for the sanctity of the Wampakanui River. To them, it was a living relative. And like most of our relatives, we would want it to be treated with care and respect. So eventually, they started arguing that the river was a te awara tupua, which is the term that there is, see if you recognize this from class. There is no separation between the spiritual and the material, and thus the river is in and of itself, has a spiritual essence to it. And it has a being, like all of us, with its own interests, and it needs to be defended. So eventually, they got in front of the New Zealand Supreme Court, arguing that Te Awa Tapua was a central tenet to their religious beliefs. And like the United States, New Zealand has a freedom of religion clause in its constitution, and that they ought to be free to be able to practice their religion, which has at its heart this idea of Te Awa Tapua. They won. In March of 2017, the river was granted personhood. Now, if that sounds strange to you, I would contend that the United States Supreme Court said that corporations are people, and that they have their own rights and such. And so, in 2017, the Maori people were granted custody, guardianship of the river, and it was called the Te Awa Tapua law, and it was passed. And so there are limitations on it. You can't sue the river, but it has to remain clean. It has to remain. It can't be overfished. It has protections from what it was. All of this has to do with everything that we talked about today in our primal religion class. That there's no separation between the spiritual and the material. That there are spiritual beings other than humans. That we have a deep bond of kinship with each other, including the natural world. So I end with that as a way of freedom religion coming around. And they actually argued in 2017 in front of the Supreme Court in New Zealand about the United States Supreme Court decision about making corporations people. And that's the best use of that court case that I've ever heard in my life. So next week, we will talk about the first organized religion, Hinduism. everything that we think about when we think of organized religion started here, roughly about 5,000 years ago. So Hinduism is the oldest organized religion in the world, continued to be practiced today. I've kept you way too long. Thank you so very much.
I already missed Jeopardy.
You missed Jeopardy?
Yeah, I already missed Jeopardy. It doesn't matter.
So thank you, everybody. I hope you learned something. Did you learn something today? Yeah, great. Excellent. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send them to me. I'd be happy to answer them. Again, I'm not an expert on primal religions, but I did the best I could tonight. I apologize to anyone of these traditions who stumble upon this video and see how much I butchered their language. I apologize, but I did the best I could. But until I see you again, may God bless you and keep you. Godspeed, everybody. Bye-bye.